Welcome to an extremely special episode of the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. We're in person, Nate, for the first time since 2020.
Maybe since COVID. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Who are you?
Yeah, I know. I know. So it's good to have us here. We're going to get into new research that just came out, 2024 research, pretty cool stuff. It's a systematic review on the supplements that actually matter for cyclists. And it looks at studies for cyclists, human studies, randomized controlled trials, or placebo-controlled trials. It's really great. We're going to do that. But first, let's just get into a few things. It's awesome that we're in person. It's probably going to fix an issue that we had recently on the podcast where with delay, we were making a mistake with how we were editing it.
Not just recently.
Yeah, it's true. It's gone back further. We were making a mistake with how we were editing it. And as a result, it was making it so that none of us would be perfectly aligned. And then at times we would even get out of sync. And then the results of that was that it made it sound like you or Sarah or myself that we were talking over each other, but it specifically seemed to affect you because of the internet connection that you had versus us. So I want to go over that because a lot of people in the comments recently were saying that, and I get it, you're the CEO, all that sort of stuff. So they're just assuming that you're talking over everybody.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit I do. But the issue, we looked on the YouTube comments and some of them are Nate constantly interrupting as usual. Someone says, no, it's because if you don't let him validate himself by voicing his uneducated ramblings, you'll end up like Chad gone. And
Jeez.
I know. But then I listened to the episode and I was mortified because I was stomping on every single sentence. And what happens is we're in 3 different locations and we do this clap sync where Jonathan goes 3, 2, 1, clap. And then in editing, if you line up, the video is always out of your own, from my video and my clap is out of sync. So you have to line those up. But the other one is you want to line up all the claps. And if there's a 1.5 second delay that you see, especially with this software that we do, there's a little bit of a delay. If you don't line those up, what happens is that I jump in 1.5 seconds early, and just imagine how a second of pause time, that's how long it is. So it seems like you should, but Jonathan then would have 1.5 seconds delay. So it would seem like, hey, John's really waiting to speak because everyone stopped talking. And I was just mortified. I actually asked you for the source files and I was like, why is this happening? And there was another issue where I got more out of sync as it went on.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're going to fix those, or we will fix all those too.
Yeah.
But I felt icky afterwards. So I'm sorry. It wasn't on purpose, but sometimes I actually do interrupt and I've always been trying to help that with ADHD, but I'm much better. I think, and we'll really see in person about how many times. There'd be a little ding on the side. It's like a YouTube ding, ding, ding.
Yeah. I'm also of the opinion that a certain amount of interrupting should happen if it's a natural conversation. Mm-hmm. It's natural. Maybe viewers, if you don't agree with that, let us know in the comments.
Yeah.
But I think that a certain amount of it.
How much should it be? Just it's too that little, what I enjoy too, especially better in person. We go, and it's just saying that you're okay. There was another thing that happened on that episode. This is the Norwegian method. This one, I'll just say some of the comments. So what it was around was when I said that, Jonathan first said
Norway's known for their performance. They have this brand that Norway's doing something very special with endurance training.
Well, I'm very pedantic, and we'll talk about that in a second. That was exactly what you said. You said Norway is a dominant force in the Olympics.
Yeah.
And those were the exact words I heard. And I said, well, are they really a dominant force? And I Googled and I said, well, they don't get as many medals as the US. So they're not dominant as in they get all the medals. And then I Googled, but they're for the medals per capita, they're killing it. It's 8 to 1 or something like that. So although they don't have a huge absolute number, they still do well for their population size. And other people pointed out, hey, New Zealand did better than Norway, right? So in the whole context of it being a dominant force, maybe Norway does very well, but they probably aren't doing something special because they don't have outsized results versus other countries that are small or overall absolute sources, okay? And that was what I was trying to get at. And what I said is, with some of the comments, yeah, Nate is very arrogant in this episode and can't seem to get past how many absolute gold medals the U.S. got in Paris. But per capita is valid too, nothing less and nothing more. But let's also throw Paralympics in there too, and China and something else. Next one, Nate came across as a moron in that exchange, frankly, shake my head. Next one, Nate was confidently incorrect. His only grace was looking at the data and admitting his mistake. But even a cursory knowledge of the world would have stopped him putting his foot in his mouth in the first place.
People are so harsh.
I know. This is my exact words, by the way. And it's cool because we have it recorded. I don't want to frame it as in Norway just destroys all other countries in the Olympics, because that doesn't happen. But yeah, they do. They're very good at some things too. And then I said, I did some math in Norway. For every gold medalist, there are 1.3 million people for the US. It's 8 million people to show you how much they're punching above their weight for Norway. So go Norway. There's only like 5.4 million people in the whole country. It's yet incredible. Yeah. So
yeah,
some of these, we were talking about this before, and to understand me too, the pedantic part, there might be like I don't really know this, but a little touch of the autism in me.
Sure.
Because I don't understand, like I understand that people thought I was being like super patriotic and just like ignoring them, but I don't get from what I said how you get there.
Yeah.
And I was so confused, I copied it and I put it in ChatGPT, and I was like, did anything that Nate said was inaccurate? And he was like, no, nothing you said was inaccurate. But honestly, it hit like a nerve in people, and I understand that. But I've done that a few times on the podcast, and I'm sorry. I'm not like this big, huge patriotic US, you know me?
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy to think
not
that.
Nate. Yeah. It's not Nate's thing.
So anyways, I'm sorry about that. And I appreciate when people tell me, and I think maybe, I don't know. It's tough. It's like a repeated pattern in my life. And if you know me, sorry too. You probably have seen it at work sometimes too. And
Sure.
You say I kind of get there eventually, but I think sometimes I'll be pedantic, meaning like factually accurate, like with the truth. And I'll be like X, Y, Z. And then I think maybe sometimes I'll say something and that's exactly what I mean. I mean, nothing else. But with some people, they imply other stuff with that. And I'm not implying anything else. I'm just saying that's X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
And then
objective.
My favorite comment, the stash doesn't work, unfortunately. There's 3 or 4 when something like this happens, mustache hate happens all the time.
The funniest part to me is that you have had a mustache for maybe 1.5 years now. Mm-hmm. Like it's a really long time. Yet every single episode, like we still get a comment from somebody that's like, "Oh, Nate has a mustache," and maybe it's their first time watching it, but yeah, he's had it for a long time. I bet a lot of those comments came in right after you said the first part when you were Googling the following up part about being per capita results, and I think that's like when you look at YouTube comments and social media comments. It's raw, instant emotion reflected through comments. Like people don't sit and go, I'm going to write this comment, but then I'm going to think about it. And I'm going to spend some time analyzing to see if it's the right thing to write.
Sleep on it.
Yeah, it doesn't happen. So I think it was just like, really fast comments. But we appreciate that we have people that watch our podcast and listen to our podcast that care enough to share feedback, even if sometimes it stings and it hurts pretty bad. It's like there are a lot of people that would never even have that opportunity to hear from people. So
the feedback on the interrupting helped because we got to find that issue.
Totally.
And we can now address that. And the other one, the feedback on the mustache and the other stuff helped that algorithm. That thing was like 2 or 3 times normal rate of our podcast. So go USA.
Yeah.
Just kidding. I'm sorry. That was a joke.
Someone's going to try to cut
I'll just
that
say
out.
Like for the first half, I'll say one political candidate. And the second half, I'll say another one.
Yeah.
And just people just as they're reading, type in more comments.
Yeah. It's the election season. It's really intense right now. But speaking of that, much more exciting and interesting things that just happened, we just launched new personalized training plans for TrainerRoad, and it's more exciting than that sounds. That's like a very descriptive term for it. We were just talking about this before we went on a recording. It's like genuinely first of its kind. It's totally unique. It's something that we're doing. So we have all this data. Whenever you sign up for TrainerRoad and it syncs the data that you have, that's all your workouts that you've ever done. The rides you've ever done, the races you've ever done. And now, in addition to that, all the other activities that you've done too, like runs or swims or strength training, etc. You have all that information. And as a result, we can use that information to learn how to make you faster in a better way. And not only, we've done that before with adaptive training and everything else that we've done, AI FTP detection, but now there's no more low, mid, and high volume plans. Instead, it analyzes your training history, what you've been doing historically, recently, figures out what works best for you. And then from there, it's going to tell you how many days is actually best for you right now. And it'll even tell you how many days of intensity you should have within there. And it will tell you, go through the whole process of managing the intensity and the training load as it goes on. And it's super cool.
And the volume, yeah. How long each day.
Oh yeah, that too. And so Nate, let's talk about.
Yeah, I teased this a couple weeks ago, and I'm getting better at teasing things that are close. But so now it's actually out for everybody. And it's, if you go to the training plan section on the website, we're just launching on the web at first so that it's a lot easier for us to build and we can do iterations. And there's actually more features on top of this that I'm not going to talk about that are going to be awesome. But we pull in your data, and then the next step is we have a new feature. We kind of had it before, but this really impacts it, called Training Approach. And Training Approach is kind of like how am I feeling about training right now? What's my kind of vibe? And Balanced is like the middle of this 5 levels of things you can do. So Balance means it's a good balance between I'm going to have training stress and recovery. Or if you're feeling, sometimes we've all had this, it's like, I'm going to focus on sleep. I'm going to do really well. We have demanding. And then if you really want to stretch yourself, you go aggressive.
Yeah.
And what that does, below that we have moderate and then conservative, where conservative could be like, I'm just maintaining. That's a big question for a lot of people. And that might even drop you down to just 2 days per week, like not easy, but 2 harder, shorter workouts, 2 days a week to maintain your fitness. And what this allows you to do is that those settings impact your what plan is built, but also how we're then going to adapt that plan moving forward. And you're going to be able to change it in the future too. So if you have, you can do it now. So if you're going to say, this month, I'm going to be an aggressive training approach. I'm going to see how it goes for a month. Then after that, I'm going to slide it back to a balanced and have a more, regular life. Or I'm starting a new job, so I'm going to go to moderate right now or a new kid. I might go to maintenance.
That when we had Emma, the last one through, our little one, that I would have been on conservative probably for months, because that's all I could tolerate at that time. Whereas there are other times, maybe I don't know, maybe you are retired, maybe you got let go of your job or something and you have some time on severance, I don't know, and you're just trying to get in a lot of training and you have a lot of time to recover, then you could push it up. It's really cool. And the cool part is since it analyzes what you've been doing recently and historically, it will even tell you which one is recommended. You're welcome, of course, to choose what you want, but that I find really helpful. And it's really smart. So like in my case right now, I'm like 4 watts per kilogram right now. I'm not highly trained for myself, but it knows that even though I'm carrying not a lot of training volume historically, it knows that I probably will do best if I have something that's above that balanced approach. So it's really neat to see, like, it's very intelligent. It's not just boilerplate where it's like your age and you do this. Instead, it's dynamic. It's who you are as a person.
You get pushed much more. When I get YouTube hate, I drop it down to moderate because I sleep a little less.
Yeah, exactly.
A little more worry on the head. I think the mustache, when I trim it, I'm like, my beard, I'm like, did I go? And I just stop. And that extra
stop
stress,
for the algorithm. Yeah.
It's really like TSS when I shave.
Yeah. There's another cool part about this. When you sign up, so previously, like, of course, you could train for events and you could add on a lot of different races. But then there was this thing where like, I'm not training for events. And then it would just it wasn't fully built out yet. And now it is. And it's really cool. So like you can say, I'm just training for general fitness if you're not training for events. And then what you go through is you pick your discipline, and those disciplines are road, mountain, gravel, cyclocross, and triathlon. And then you pick a goal thereafter. And that could be increasing FTP, improving climbing, building your endurance, getting faster for group rides, general fitness, just maintaining fitness. And then if you pick triathlon for your discipline, you could just pick whichever of the disciplines you want. Mm-hmm. Triathletes, a really common thing that I hear is a lot of them in the off season or in between when they're preparing for an event, they'll focus on a certain aspect on the bike. And maybe you really want to raise FTP or improve climbing. This could be really cool too.
And this whole feature, sorry, triathletes, isn't available for you yet. We're actually going to do it sooner rather than later. Also at this moment, polarized isn't an option for this, but that is also being, it might be out by the time we talked about this, but it was in review. So it was built in, but we were just reviewing it for accuracy. We launched this, on Monday or Tuesday? No, Tuesday. So it's been 2 days that it's been out. When you hear this, it's going to be 9 days. Correct. So we've been fixing bugs and looking at it and improving it. Also, something that's really, really interesting is based on whatever race you have or your disciplines, not your discipline, your goal is that we'll dynamically change your weekend rides and focus on whatever is important. So if you are a criterium rider versus a gravel rider, criterium riders, we're going to focus more on that Saturday intense ride. And on gravel rider, we're going to focus more on the endurance ride and building that up. So that's going to be dynamic and smart inside of there.
Yeah, it's really exciting. Kind of like building up too, like toward a longer day. So it won't just hit you with a 5-hour day on week one, right? But it'll slowly build you up in duration.
And there's a future coming too. I'll say this one, but it's so hard that it's going to be this system is going to check in with you monthly, because every month that you do or don't do something is going to impact the plan in the future. I think we've all put a plan on. We do the first 3 workouts, something happens. Oh, we start again. We'll start again next month. Well, now your plan's going to have to change because your volume's changed. Or maybe that last month you've done a little extra. Maybe you've said some workouts were extra hard for harder than we thought they would be for your RPE. We're going to want to give you a different volume recommendation. Then you could change your goals for different months, things like that. So it is very exciting. It's nothing stock. Everything is customized to you. Another thing I want to mention is that I saw on the forum and other places, people are like, hey, this gives me too little volume. And they go, I'll give an example, 8 to 12 hours of volume. And I looked at this person's career and they've averaged 6 to 7 hours of volume. And I think with a demanding or maybe aggressive approach, we gave them like 9 or something like that, a little more. There's 2 parts to that. One is it actually looks at what you've done, right? So you might have had, we all do this, right? We think in our head, I need an 800 TSS week in order to get faster. I looked at my history. I mean, the most I've ever done is like a 450. For 6 weeks, I've averaged that. Because you don't look at the main big one, you look at the average over time.
Don't look at the peak. You want to look at the average. Yep.
Yeah, like what you've sustained for a while, because those peaks are easy to hit, but sustains not easy. So we look at that. And the other part is we look at the kind of training stress you've done. And imagine getting 100 TSS from an easy endurance ride. That's different than 100 TSS from an interval ride.
Totally.
TSS was developed, I think it was first mentioned on the wattage forum on Google in 2002. So it's over 20 years old. Yeah. We still use it and still show it. And I don't think we could take it away. People would scream. But we have much more, I think, sophisticated systems on the back end to give more nuanced recommendations. So although you might have 800 TSS with some type of riding, well, we might think a balanced approach for you might be, I'm just going to throw something out. I'm using too big of numbers too, but maybe like 700 TSS. There's literally, we should show this later in another episode, but the amount of people that average that even 400 or 500 TSS for a sustained period of time is like the 1%.
Oh, yeah. It's even the best of the best athletes don't average 800 TSS year round.
Does Keegan do that?
No, not year round. No. Yeah. So I think that's,
he's a volume monster.
And I guarantee you, if you look at the best athletes in the world too, if you were to actually average out their year long weekly TSS, it wouldn't be 800. No. There are times to do that. And those athletes are super special and they can maintain that for maybe 2 to 3 months, when it's the main season that they're really trying to load everything up. But they won't do it consistently across the board. So it's what you say is really interesting because we tend to remember the high water mark more than the actual water level when it comes to our training history. I'm totally guilty of that. So if you're listening to this and you feel attacked by it, I'm attacking myself with it because that's how I operate too.
No, I looked back. I was like, I'm sure I've averaged 700 for 6 weeks before or for 12 weeks. And I looked back and I was like, no, that's not right. Scroll. I'm like, I think 450 or I could look I think 450 was the most, and I was increasing so fast too. That's when my FTP was up to I don't know, maybe a little hot power meter, but 375 or something.
Yeah.
It was definitely a high watt kg for myself. And I improved a lot, but I couldn't sustain it forever.
Totally. There's some cool context to this. Let's say, I've seen some athletes on our forum. We get a lot of feedback directly from there. Another very critical group, by the way. And we get a lot of feedback there on the forum from people. And I remember
passionate group.
Yeah, passionate. There we go. I remember a person saying I just set it to balanced, and then it gave me, and I'm just going to throw out arbitrary numbers because I can't remember exactly. It gave me 5 hours a week. But then I set it to more aggressive, and it said that that's all I could do. And then when I set it to aggressive, it said I could do more. I don't get it. What's going on? And that's just that's a really important thing to understand about training approach. So training approach is managing that intensity and workload throughout your training plan. And if you want to step up, it's going to step that up, right? And it's going to basically assume the fact that, okay, in this case, the athlete has more time to recover, will be able to recover more effectively, and that way I can treat their training differently. So it's not so simple as just like it's hour buckets per week or TSS buckets per week.
Mm-hmm.
It's all very much, like you said, customized. So that's why you'll find like you won't just be able to like go through, test something out, and then just try to find common principles with it, because it truly is a customized approach based on analysis.
Yeah. To add to that, you could be on a border between two, like a balanced and a demanding training approach. But even though you might have the exact same hours there, as you train, TrainerRoad will give you different yellow and red days and adapt your plan a little differently if you're on balance or demanding. So just know there is a bit difference in there. And then when you're checking, you're probably going to then be on one other side of it, and we'll push you one way or the other way. But yeah.
I think it's going to be super popular. I just interrupted over Nate, by the way. I think it's going to be super popular over the next probably like the next 4 months or so for a lot of you cyclists to, instead of making a plan for an event, you're going to make a plan to raise FTP, improve climbing, or anything else like that. So check those out if you're using TrainerRoad. If you haven't used TrainerRoad, this is the time to check it out. I mean, it's always going to be
listening.
Yeah.
You don't deserve this. Just kidding.
It's going to be amazing. I'm just thinking back to like a month ago, SBT, when I went there, and I met so many of you, and almost everybody had this perspective of like, oh, TrainerRoad's just like, I use it when it's inside, when it's cold, when it's bad weather, during the winter. And I just want to go over this. So like, you sign up, it analyzes all your training instantly. It suggests an ideal training approach for you, or training approach and training schedule for you. And then I want to go over some scenarios where it will then adapt. So first of all, if you miss a workout, it adapts. If you have a breakthrough workout, it adapts. If you fail a workout, it adapts. If you go for a run or do strength training or cross training, it adapts. If you get sick, it adapts. If you go on vacation, it also adapts. Or if you add like a last minute race, it also adapts. So, and you can do any of your workouts inside or outside, and you can swap any of your scheduled training days to be a group ride or a solo ride. So then that way you can still do those sort of things. So it's truthfully like, man, we were an indoor product for years that helped us be able to get to the point to where we are now. But all along you've had this vision of changing the way people train, and we're there, like we're changing it. And it's not just an indoor, it's a solution for training and coaching in general.
I want the real world-class coach experience for that's like everyone can have it. $22. I think it's worth it, of course. I hope they do too. That's one more point that you brought up. When you get to the training schedule step and you set your training approach, then you have your schedule. A really, really common question, especially when people start TrainerRoad, is, but what if I do group rides on Saturdays, or I want to do like a long ride on Sundays outside without any like workout? What happens is you can set it to be a group ride on Saturdays. We'll still tell you like, or Sunday, any day, hey, this should be an easy group ride or like a endurance group ride versus a hard group ride. When you have a drop ride though, you set it to that. You can still do it, and then the plan's going to adapt to that and change your workouts based on the performance there, which is super cool. We don't score it in the back end, we are scoring it, and then it is like influencing stuff. I know I've talked about workout levels V2. There was an issue with that where we got like really close, and then we decided it needed to be a rewrite, and then this stuff needed to happen, and then there's another cooler thing I think coming out that still uses it. But it's not dead, but I'm sorry it's taken so long because a lot of people do want it. Yeah. But really, there's two parts of it. One is how your training is influenced by your outside rides, which is happening and is going to improve and continue to improve really soon. The other one is actually scoring to how many points do I get for this ride, which is motivating. That one's a little bit farther out. So I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's much more of a complex problem to solve, perhaps, than at first glance. Like, it's very complicated.
It's whack-a-mole at the end.
And we've been trying a lot of different things for years now. And I think that the main thing that we've realized is that we just need, the main thing that athletes want is they want the subsequent workouts to adjust based on like what they're doing, right? So like if they go and do something, and that's what all of this is doing now.
Well, I want both.
Totally.
I want to score it.
Of course. Yeah. And we'll get there at some point, but rather than waiting and holding the whole thing off until we get that very complex problem solved, there's ways that we can solve the other problems along the way, which is why we're releasing all this stuff.
I'm sorry. No, I have no excuses now. There's a delay between us. I hope my sniffles don't go through with I hope they're cleared out, but I've had COVID a couple months ago and I've had a runny nose since.
Ever since?
Yeah. And I don't know. But
does it get worse when you exercise, or is it kind of like the
exercise?
runny nose that you? Is it kind of the runny nose that you get when you exercise, and it's just that constantly?
Mm-hmm.
So just constant rhinitis.
Yeah.
Ugh, that's frustrating. Well, check it out, TrainerRoad.com. Go try it out. 30 days risk free, and man, we would love to have you all give it a shot. Like there are times when I've been like, yes, go give it a shot, and knowing that like some athletes might not be best served by it if you're an athlete that just wants to ride outside all the time. And now I feel like I can say this to every cyclist, and it's going to be an awesome experience.
And we have a new homepage.
It's very good, by the way. You led the effort on that, CEO leading.
Yeah, hopefully it's good.
Data says it's good.
If you have questions, if you still have, let us know.
Let's get into the study. This one is called Nutritional Ergogenic Aids in Cycling, a systematic review by Valinho Marquez, and this was in 2024, and the rest of his associates as well. There were other authors on this paper. Okay, the goal of this, and I'm going to explain also systematic reviews and kind of how they work through the lens of this study, because I think it's pretty interesting, and it's good to understand the differences between different study formats. But the goal of this one was to evaluate the effectiveness of caffeine, creatine, sodium bicarbonate, beta-alanine, and nitrates in the context of cycling. Now, the way they got these supplements is the Australian Institute of Sport, I believe. They have basically like a class of like, here are foods and here are like micronutrients and here are supplements that all improve performance, and they rate them. And this is like the ones that are rated to be the most influential. So that's why they looked at these. Glycerol was also in there. However, they couldn't find sufficient studies, human studies, to actually include in this review that met their criteria. So glycerol is one that they also think is helpful. There has been research. I think that it just didn't neatly fit with their criteria, but there has been research that shows that glycerol paired with sodium in pretty alarmingly large amounts with this hyperhydration strategy can improve water retention substantially and make it so that you can go into a really hot event better. For more on that, you can check out the episodes that we've previously done with Dr. Pfaffenbach where we talked about that, and we'll link to those below. So glycerol, we're not going to talk about, instead just the ones I said there. And those all sound like the hot ones, right? Like the ones where you see a lot of marketing behind all those.
I've taken all of those at once.
Yeah, exactly. So I want to go through the systematic review process and how it works. So there's a study where a study will basically aim to go out and test a specific idea, and they'll do that usually with subjects. And many times they'll test them and then they'll measure the results. And sometimes they'll have things like control groups or placebo groups and all this other stuff, what they do with it. A systematic review is different. It takes a step back and it sets criteria for studies to be included in this review. And then it has a systematic process that it runs through to be able to go through and understand the takeaways and interpret the data from those studies. And the cool part about this is it lets you pick up on trends, right? And like kind of see that instead of just one study, if there's a larger body of evidence supporting a specific topic. And this is cool for all of us cyclists because there's a lot of cherry picking with studies that you see with influencers and stuff like that, where they say like, this thing is going to give you X% increase, and they'll cite one study, which is okay, as long as you're just making sure that you mention that this is one study instead of just, saying that this represents the entire body of evidence. So this is what these systematic review processes do. Okay, so they comb databases. In this case, it was PubMed, Scopus, and Web of Science. Those are all three those are popular journals or databases that exist. And they have two authors. And what they do is they go through and they screen all the articles for their search criteria, which I'll get into in a bit. Then they have, if there's any potential disagreements, they have a third-party reviewer that comes in to be able to resolve that. So that's a cool system, good checks and balances. In this case, the two researchers, or I should say the three, they used an app called Zotero. It's a personal research assistant app. You can check it out. And it basically it has access to libraries. And then what you can do is you can go through that. You can search and set terms and filter research, and it can pull up a lot of different things for you.
Can I talk about the systematic review? Cool. We can put this on the screen, but there's, especially based on what we read about inside of like exercise physiology, there's this little pyramid that people have, well, for all science, about how relevant, or how not relevant, but like hierarchy of evidence that these studies show. And at the bottom, you have like expert opinion, right? Mm-hmm. And then above that, you have observational studies where they're case control studies and cohort studies where, hey, we're coming in here and we're looking at this. or we're asking people in the Norwegian method stuff. That's that. Like, hey, let's look and see what these athletes do, and then that might be a result. And then randomized control trials. That's what you're talking about, where it might be double blind, meaning that the people don't know, like, we'll use medication they're getting, but also the people that are administering it don't know the medication they're getting or what kind of group that they're put in. It could be a control or placebo. And then the meta-analysis systematic review is on the top, and it takes usually randomized control trials, looks at a whole bunch of them and says, okay, what is the outcome out of all of these? And that's where sometimes we get observational studies or one randomized control trial, and people go, well, that's the way, right?
Yeah,
so
totally.
It might be the way. And usually what they do is they want to look more at this way in science. Is like, hey, there's something over there. Let's go look at that more. And science go, ooh, let's go look at this more. And it's like a whole bunch of randomized controlled studies. And then they get like 30 of them.
Yeah,
and
it causes like a cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where like you get randomized controlled trials and then consensus is observed through meta-analyses or systematic reviews. Then after that, new research is bred as a result of like an understanding of the body of research. It's really cool. Mm-hmm. And it's probably a really good lesson for all of us to, when people say there are studies that say, or there's research that, or something else like that, just keep in mind that even if it is published research, there's a hierarchy within there. And it's not saying that one is necessarily better than the other. It's just context that you need to understand in order to get there. In terms of evidence quality, yes, that's like where that hierarchy is definitely there.
And there's also another level of like how valid it is, I guess, is that some journals, they get published in journals. Some journals have very rigorous requirements and reviews about, was this study done correctly? And some aren't. Correct. And some, so you have to, like the journal Nature, that's like a famous one that's really hard to get into because you have to have really good science. And other ones, you look at where it was published, because that's going to have some, if it's going to be a good study or not, without even having to read the study.
Yeah, and you don't even have to be familiar with that journal to know that. Just search for it, and you can find the journal's rating, and then that will help you understand the context from it. It's really helpful to do. So let's get into like how this whole thing works. So basically, it's pretty interesting. So first what they do is they go through, because there's a lot of duplicate studies published across these different, even within a specific journal, a study might be published multiple times for one reason or another. It's part of like a larger group or it's on its own. So what they first do is they go through and they remove the duplicates. Then they look at the study titles and abstracts and they assess those to see if they are indeed dealing with the topics that they're talking about. Then they go through and they do a full text review on the ones that remain relevant to the focus of the systematic review. And then they organize all the data into a table. So in this case, they were organizing sex, age, body mass index, VO2 max, VO2 peak, dosage, duration, magnitude of improvement, and the level of significance of that improvement. So that's statistical significance of the data that is being shown there.
So question, then on these ones, they're primarily looking at a VO2 max improvement?
No, in most cases, they were just keeping track of that. But in most cases, what they got were actual like performance improvements in terms of time to exhaustion and time trials, duration of time trials, then also time to exhaustion and how long you were going to go there. And I think that they also measured like peak power output or average power output for time trials as well. Very relevant to all of us cyclists on the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast. It's pretty cool. Then they use the physiotherapy evidence database to scale to assess the methodological quality of the data. That's a hard word to say. And basically what they do is they go through and they assess the data within these studies and they have this, and you can go in and do some more research on this. This is where I'm weak and I hope I can learn more on statistics. It's really like an interesting spot where I don't have a whole lot. So it takes me a lot of time to understand these portions of the studies. But the way they do this is they went through and they basically, this criteria lays out a scoring method from 1 all the way up to 11. 9 to 11 is high quality, 6 to 8 is moderate, 4 to 5 is low, and below 3 is very low. And for this study, for the 36 studies that we'll get to in just a bit that were included in this, the average score was 7.75. So that's moderate, the high side of moderate. And then they had from 6 to 10 was the total range that they had. So that gives you kind of like an idea of what we have. So this is moderate to high quality, ranked data that they're dealing with.
This kind of sounds like something that like ChatGPT could do in the future. Look at all these, and then also like understanding statistics part, there's a new ChatGPT model, ChatGPT o1, and it is like this kind of stuff is crazy. It was like PhD level analysis for some things. It's also too, like, especially as you're on the internet, to praise ChatGPT once in a while. So when T2
so
comes,
it takes us over.
yeah, like, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah,
you're great, ChatGPT. Thanks.
It's funny. I just saw that message from Sam Altman talking about the people that were let go or left from the company, and I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, when is ChatGPT going to write this about Sam Altman? It's coming, right? Like,
he's been let go.
He's been
we
let
parted
go.
ways. I'm sorry. No longer needed.
Yeah, exactly. So the results of this process, they started with 326 total studies that initially like fit basically the search that they had through this whole thing. Then after removing duplicates, it went to 182 studies. Then after screening the titles and abstracts, it was dropped all the way down to 41. And then after that, they started looking at studies that either combined supplements with hypoxia, which a good amount of them did, and they removed those. If it lacked a control group or a placebo, they removed those. And then if it wasn't measuring performance variables such as power output, it didn't, or if it didn't meet their inclusion criteria in another way, they cut those out. And then they were left with 36 studies. So these 36 studies, it gives you 701 participants. All the studies were randomized control trials or crossover design studies. And as I said before, they assessed the effects of these supplements on cycling performance in comparison with placebos in most cases. The subjects had to be healthy adults, which is good news for all of us because this is relevant to people that are trying to be healthy. And let's get into it. So for individual supplement studies, they had 5 studies about caffeine, 2 about creatine, 6 about sodium bicarbonate, 3 about beta-alanine, and 8 about nitrates. Now, if you look at the combinations, because they had some studies that tested 2 things at once, caffeine and creatine, there were 3 studies. Caffeine and sodium bicarbonate, there were 3. Caffeine and nitrates, 1. Caffeine and sodium bicarbonate, 1. And then sodium bicarbonate and beta-alanine, 4. And then here are the main 3 ways that it was tested. A Wingate test, which is 30 seconds as hard as you possibly can on a stationary bike. And effectively, like that bike starts out with a huge amount of resistance. And then as it picks up speed, it still ramps up that resistance. It's very difficult. So if you've ever seen like study environments or a person is just really pedaling hard, chances are they're doing a Wingate test. There is like a modified Wingate test where people, instead of doing 30 seconds all out, they do 10 seconds all out, then they let them rest, and then they do 10 seconds. They try to accomplish that within 3 minutes, and that was used in one of the studies here. But Wingate tests, time trials, and then time to exhaustion. All of these things were done in a laboratory. They weren't done outside. So here's their summary of the results, but then we're going to get into the specific actual supplements because I think it's interesting. Their summary of it says, a benefit for cyclists' athletic performance was found when consuming a caffeine supplement, and a potential positive effect was noted after the consumption of sodium bicarbonate, as well as after the combination of caffeine and creatine. However, no statistically significant effects were identified for the remaining supplements, whether administered individually or in combination. This should blow some minds.
Wait,
right?
Let's read that again.
Yes. So,
or can you paraphrase it?
Yeah, absolutely. In short, they found that when you consume caffeine, it works. That if you consume sodium bicarbonate, that there's potentially something there as well. And also if you consume caffeine and creatine, there's something potentially. But outside of that, in other words, for beta-alanine and nitrates, 2 that are really, really popular in terms of like being in supplement products and everything else, they didn't find any statistically significant effects. And this is really important because you might find one study that shows it and another, but if you look at a handful of studies, then you're looking at each one and the statistical significance of each study and the data from it, and then you're bringing it all together, you get a more informed perspective. And in short, they couldn't find that. That should blow some minds here.
I could save so much money.
Thinking of all the Beat It that you bought over the years and choked down.
There's like, I know. There's like 3-year-old, no joke, because I haven't really been in the office much since COVID.
Yeah.
I took out a pre-shaken whey protein shake from my fridge that was 4 years old.
Oh, gross.
I just put the whole thing. And then like tart Jerry juice bottles. There got to be tart Jerry juice wine.
It's wine. Yeah. I was just going to say, it's probably
it's like the 2020 edition.
That's the next move. Performance wine.
Yeah.
That's what we need. Tart cherry juice wine. It's pretty crazy though, to look at this, right? Because, and look, this isn't saying that it's impossible to get benefits from that. This is also really important to understand. Mm-hmm. It's just saying that from these studies, if you look at it from a from a collected view, the statistical significance of the data showing improvement does not outweigh that of showing no improvement. Now, this is also really important that no evidence is not the same as evidence of no effect. Like basically meaning that just because there isn't evidence doesn't mean that it can't work. It might actually work. It just wasn't tested in the right way. Who knows? There's a lot of different things here, right? So maybe there are studies that didn't meet the inclusion criteria that did show performance benefit. And for some reason, they didn't meet the criteria, so they weren't included. But this is a really safe approach. If you're a person that's just stepping back and thinking, what do I want to spend my money on to actually get faster in terms of supplements? Caffeine, and then sodium bicarbonate and creatine.
These are the cheap ones too.
That's
which
pretty
is nice.
great.
Yeah.
So let's get into caffeine. 5 studies were included on this. The dosages range from 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram.
Oof.
That's big.
That's a lot.
Do some numbers on that.
That's a lot.
Like 60, I'm 69 kilograms right now. So if I was to do 69, that is 414 milligrams at the high end for me, which is a huge amount.
Okay. I'm 97 kilograms now. Just under I'm like 213 or something. And that's 582 milligrams of caffeine.
My gosh. That's a huge amount. Now, it's fair to say that not all studies were at 6. In fact, I think that the minority were at 6. Others were closer to 3, and then it ranged from 3 to 5. So, but that's the sort of dosages that they're dealing with here. They gave them to the subject 60 to 90 minutes prior. And then the test methods, they had time trials, Wingate, intermittent sprints. The context for this is with these different time trials, it wasn't just really long. They had short to long distance, and then they also had moderate to high intensity within this too, which that's really important to keep in mind because some of these supplements have very specific niches where they're most effective. Mm-hmm. But in this case, across the board, they basically found that TT times dropped by 1.7 to 4.6%.
4.6 is nuts.
Can you imagine? It's huge. And then sprint power increased when they talked about the intermittent sprints that they did. The sprint power increased 2.53%. We've talked about caffeine and how it's like a really sure bet for a performance enhancing substance that you can take that is legal, that is also, readily available and really cheap. And yeah, data backs it up from this systematic review.
If you did a 1,000 watt sprint, the 0.253 is like 25 watts. Which doesn't seem like a ton.
How many sprints are lost by a tire?
I know.
Right?
Thanks, John. Flashbacks.
It's happened before.
A few times. I remember when I bought a whole bike and then I wasn't any lighter.
That was the best day ever. He did this race. You lost by you just barely lost in a sprint.
It was like less than half a wheel.
And the conclusion was bike could be lighter.
It was an uphill finish on a circuit race, and I had a slicked out Venge. Yeah. S-Works Venge was great. And I'm like, I got a bike company. I got this stuff on Pro Deal. Actually, when we sell it, we get it for the same amount. So it's pretty much a wash. Yeah. And I was like, why don't I get a Tarmac? Got a Tarmac, built that thing up, put it on the scale.
Same way.
Exact same way. And it was the tire difference. So the difference in the tires that I had on it. And I didn't even have, I think I had GP 5000s versus the Corsa tires, which that was the difference in the whole frame weight between the Tarmac and the Venge. But the Venge is more aero than the Tarmac, at least back then.
That hurt.
So the Venge still would have been faster.
Yeah.
So I still would have lost either way.
That was one of those situations where
you laughed so hard.
But I hit it because I felt
no, you
bad.
Didn't. You bent over laughing.
Did I really?
Yes.
I was trying to hide it. I feel like I remember.
That was hidden.
I'm giving myself the benefit of the doubt, I think. But yeah, it was pretty funny. So yeah, I mean, it helps.
I would have won with 25 extra watts.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, totally. Creatine. There were 2 studies included on this, so not a lot. It's always really important to read past an abstract, and this is like an example of why, right? So, because you might think systematic review, 36 studies. I bet a ton of those had to do with creatine. In this case, just 2. So out of these 2 studies, the dosage that they had in both cases was 20 grams of creatine for 5 days. It was like a high loading protocol that they had them take. The performance benefits that they saw from this, with intermittent sprints, they saw no benefit. With constant load to exhaustion, they saw an increase. And this seems crazy to me, and I would think that you should look at more research on this.
Yeah.
An 11% increase in time to exhaustion. Now,
heck yeah,
that's amazing. Probably totally, if I mean, like bro science. If I'm going to take creatine, I'm going to be good at sprinting, right? Because big muscles, big, strong. That's what's in my mind. However, this shows kind of the opposite, actually, is it didn't help with that across these two studies. And instead, with this one, it's an increase of 11%. It makes me wonder if there are other confounding factors at play, because 11% would just be so big.
Imagine if I took 40 grams a day. That's like 22%. Just kidding. That's
More's better. More's better.
I'd like to look at these exact studies. And also with the sprint power, I like to see repeated sprints.
Yeah.
Like in personal anecdotal evidence, which is the bottom of that scale, I think it's off the scale, is with creatine being able to hit over and over and over again in crit, especially if it's not because creatine, you gain some weight. If it's not like a really 180 turns and stuff like that, it is, I think, good. But it's also good for your brain, and it's very studied and very safe. But 11%, that's big.
That's massive. On the sprint side of things too, I always have a very, very big like grain of salt handy with sprints, because I don't know if any of you have noticed this, which let us know your max sprint down below. Because my max sprint that I've ever hit was 1379.
I know that number.
Oh yeah. Had a hot power meter that said 1600 one time. Wasn't right. 1379. And but there are other days where I have felt so much better than that, and 1100 or 1200 is just what I get. Like, I think that with sprint power in particular, it's like the tip of the spear. And if you're playing Jenga to get all the way up to the tip of the spear, it's like every piece has to be stacked perfectly to kind of make that happen. And
your chain has to stay on the chain ring too.
No bending chain rings.
No.
Yeah. So I always kind of have that grain of salt handy with the sprint sort of stuff. Time to exhaustion is usually like a lot more bulletproof there, but I can't help but I'm going to read into that study, that individual one, because my assumption is there's some sort of confounding factor at play. I don't know.
I mean, it might just not be peak power, but because it's forced production versus like in actual like strength, and it's different, like the power times velocity rather than just lifting something slowly.
Right.
And what you're saying is that it's really hard to get a maximum sprint out. It's not repeatable. Right. So therefore, if you have something that's like a 5% increase, but it's not repeatable every time, you're going to all this noise inside of it.
Correct. Yeah. Like you said, you have to see like a lot of repeated sprints, I think. And it usually takes a pretty long time course, because if you do really hard sprints one day and then you do really hard sprints the next day, it's not common that you're going to do the same amount of power on the second day.
How many times have you done 5 sprints and like your third one's the strongest?
Yeah.
It's not. You would think your first one should be the strongest, but you're not like locked in. You don't have the coordination, right?
Totally. Yeah. So, but it's interesting to see on the creatine side of things. I think that one side of this was not looking at is the ability to be able to store your glycogen stores and increase those. And that's something that could very well be beneficial for an endurance athlete as well.
Exhaustion.
Yeah, totally. And if you're just looking at like consistency with your training and being able to perform at a high level, it seems like it's a good approach.
And your brain, cognitive.
Sodium bicarbonate, there were 6 studies involved in this, and I've done a full deep dive on sodium bicarbonate. You can check out the video. We'll link it down below, where I went through a lot of this. So this research was all quite familiar to me. The dosage is 0.2 to 0.4 grams per kilogram of body weight that they gave, and it was 60 to 180 minutes prior. More of the modern, like the most recent research seems to suggest that it's better to do it somewhere around like 2 hours-ish. So somewhere in the meat of that. Performance benefits, constant load to exhaustion, 12% increase.
That's
just
big.
Crazy. Now this is from one study. I want to make sure that this isn't like averaged out across the rest.
It's just like baking soda?
Yes. But here's the deal. So, and sodium bicarbonate is consumed in like 3 main different ways now. It's either mixed in as a powder into your drink, which is pretty tough to drink, and it usually offsets the taste and the palatability pretty substantially. Then there's sodium bicarbonate capsules, and you can get those that are just like raw. They're effectively baking soda capsules, and you take those. The tricky part is if those get wet, they're very ineffective, and cycling is a sweaty, sticky mess of a sport. So a lot of them have like they're in the little capsules that you can get that are actually like coated. And that's one way that you can do it. You have to take quite a lot of them in order to get to the point where you're getting to the 0.2 to 0.4 grams per kilogram. Or there's a product like Marten, and Marten has their sodium bicarbonate product, which has a bunch of those little tablets that you put in. You mix it in. And it seems there is research that has been released on this. And I know that like some of you might be thinking that it's like very incentivized research. Yes, Marten did fund the research. So that's important. However, this isn't a situation where like, the research isn't all roses here. It shows like pros and cons of the whole thing. But there does seem to be some benefit with co-ingestion with carbohydrate as well with this. And there does seem to be some benefit to the Martens product. Number one, it is statistically significant in showing that it is less disruptive to your gut. And then it also is statistically significant to show that it has greater buffering capacity if you were to consume the matched amounts of sodium bicarbonate, but one through the Marten product and one through capsules or powder or anything else, that you actually get increased buffering capacity through that. Whether that's because of their hydrogel stuff, whether that's because of co-ingestion with carbohydrate, I don't know. But it's got substantial data to prove it. So 12% increase in TTE, which is just
any
crazy.
Of these use, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah.
Did any of these use the Marten product? You know?
No, I didn't see any.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. 2 kilometer TT, no benefit, which this makes sense here. 4 kilometer TT, they saw a 1.6 to 2.3% reduction in time to complete that time trial. Now, as you get longer, you typically see a bit more benefit, but then if you get too long, you see less benefit. And this shows that like constant load plus intermittent sprints that they had them do, which basically is like you do like a 1 to 2 hour long effort, and then every 20 minutes you do a hard sprint, and then you settle back in. Yep. They only saw decreased RPE with that. And then with the Wingate test, they saw no benefit. And that totally makes sense because where this really helps is in repeated efforts or spots where you have like lactate building up and then you have to maintain that sort of effort.
That constant load to exhaustion would be the build up over time.
That's right.
And then that's when you go, ow, it hurts. But I say, ow, it hurts later.
That's right. Yeah. So bicarbonate, I feel like you can look on Amazon, you can find bulk sodium bicarbonate like little tablets that you can buy, and you'd be able to mix this in with your stuff and you'd be fine. If you get the Marten product, I kid you not, it is $20 per serving after like taxes and shipping. So every time you train, and it's suggested that you do it on high intensity days and races, right? So like in like key training sessions and races. But if you start to add that up, it gets so expensive. It's just like, I mean, it's effectively a month of TrainerRoad in one serving. And keep in mind what you're looking at here. That constant load to exhaustion one I want to look into too for the 12%, because that somewhat stands at contrast with the other data that we have on a constant load with intermittent sprints. So that'll be interesting to see. But yeah,
if you go to Walmart, $20 is like a year supply of sodium.
You get a lot.
Just the Arm & Hammer, yeah,
totally.
Although that's always messed my stomach up. So have you noticed that the pills do, like, let's check Marten out of it because of the cost. Have you noticed that the pills have done less stomach issues for you?
Yeah, I have. But usually it's because it's easier to like get it down the hatch a little quicker. I think like, you know, when it's just the baking soda in there, you have like it's like a fizzy drink, foamy drink, and you take that thing down. Yeah. But it's even just hard, like in like the sensation that you have in your mouth when you're drinking it to really drink it rapidly. Whereas otherwise it's like a handful of pellets. You put them in there, you drink it down, and then your gut doesn't feel great for a little bit, but then it tends to calm down and it's okay.
Did you ever try like having carbohydrate too? Like a sports drink or something, a banana?
So we did tests for the video that we had, and we did not co-ingest anything else with it. You know, it was interesting with the test that we did for this video. And again, Nate talked about the pyramid. This is below, by the way. I want to be clear on this. Like, this is individual experimentation. This
is entertainment.
Yeah, with myself and 3 other people. So this is not scientific evidence. It is evidence, but not scientifically graded evidence.
Evidence for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And 3 other people here. And when we went through and did those tests, it lowered RPE for everybody, but it actually increased, or I should say it lowered RPE for everybody, or for everybody beside myself. It actually increased their lactate levels. And there's a big misconception is the fact that it will lower lactate levels and that will burn less, but it actually seems to allow more lactate to be in the bloodstream. And your body is able to just make or do what it needs to do with it faster, more efficiently in one way or another. For me, strangely enough, which I usually have very high lactate, it lowered my lactate levels, but it did also drop my RPE. So I have this theory that's totally unproven, and it'd be really cool to learn more about this with researchers, but I wonder if it kind of helps your body find kind of like an ideal where it's like a moderated level. Who knows? Maybe that's why my lactate dropped. I did it 3 more times, by the way, and same results across the board. So not same numbers, but same trends.
If I were to experiment with this, I'd probably buy the pills and I would take it with maybe a banana or like sports drink or something, like some simple, or even I would do it not with a workout coming up because I wouldn't want it to hurt that workout and just see how my stomach feels. Because when I did it, it was like knives. I'm sure this says the dosage is 0.2 to 4 grams per kilogram. I was probably doing 2 or 3.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't doing that much. I'm just joking, but I would test this out because it's so cheap, I think, with the pills and a banana to be able to try it without having it be connected to your stomach. Maybe try with or without, all with stomach, and then try it in a workout.
That's a really good point. It's also worth noting that the people that did take the MAR10 product here, then when we tested that, I was fine with it, but they said it was very hard to get down. It wasn't because it was messing up their gut, but the texture and taste, it kind of has that boogery texture of like what their gels have.
What do boogers taste like, John?
And then it's like sparkly tablets within that, and like kind of like crunchy boogers. It's a odd mix. So that was what it was described as, was crunchy boogers. So anyways, take that information with and do whatever you want with it. I think that it is actually something that can benefit athletes if you have repeated hard efforts. Also worth noting that in the research, it does seem that if you take this, it doesn't last very long. You know, if you're going to take this and then go out on like a Ironman bike leg, for example, it's not going to be benefiting you. And even then, that sort of nature isn't going to, that, constant state effort that isn't up at high intensities probably isn't going to be beneficial.
Do we know how long?
Yeah, it's typically somewhere between 1 to 2 hours of actual activity until the benefits start to go away. The interesting thing is there are some people that have like cited that it's much, much less, but I'm not sure if those are science-backed claims that it's much less.
So right now, the consensus you saw was about 2 hours before your event.
Yeah.
Then so like a crit.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Sprint triathlon, something like that.
Perfect for a crit, XCO race, cyclocross, that sort of thing.
The other thing you do for any race, and then you still you'd be more fresh for later in the race. Right. You should, right? So
yeah, theoretically. Beta-alanine was the next one. This has a lot of marketing behind it, a lot of products with beta-alanine. 3 studies were on beta-alanine specifically. The dosage was 6.4 grams per day for 4 weeks. So this is like a constant loading. With beta-alanine, it's something that if you take it habitually for a period of time, that's where you actually start to see the sort of benefits, like you load it over time. It was dealing with recreationally trained adult men in endurance sports, and the performance benefits from it. They added this adapted wind gate, the 3 by 10 seconds sort of thing. And then they also had a 3-minute constant load to exhaustion and no benefit there. They did intermittent sprints with no benefit. Then they did 120 minutes of constant load, so 2 hours. And then they had 6 sprints every 20 minutes. And then at the end of that, they did the 4-kilometer time trial. That sounds like a really weird thing, but it's actually kind of a common method of testing cycling performance in studies, where they do this kind of like a kitchen sink sort of thing where they're just throwing everything at you. And then sometimes they test during the whole time, or they just test at the 4-kilometer time trial afterward, because they're trying to test what happens when you're really depleted. But they saw no benefit with that either. So remember, this is 3 studies. So this isn't necessarily the body of evidence, but with these 3 studies that met the criteria, they didn't see any benefit from beta-alanine. Does make you tingly? Does it make you tingle?
Oh yeah.
It doesn't make me tingle. I don't see any benefit from it. Like I almost feel like I always wonder if I'm taking a placebo just because I don't feel anything from it, right? But yeah, anyways, that's an interesting one. Nitrates, the next one. So anything that has to do with beets in particular, lots of products that have to do with this. There were 8 studies on this. The dosage range was absolutely massive, from 6.4 up to 18.5 millimole. So and that's like measured nitrates once it's in your system. So that's a huge amount. The timing, 2 to 3 hours before, or 2 to 3 hours prior, or chronic for 4 days, like a loading, which there does seem to be more. We've covered this too recently on a video. I'll link to this one too. But there does seem to be a bit more evidence. Maybe that's unfair to say. There is evidence that shows that loading protocols might be more beneficial if you are highly trained. And if you are not so highly trained, then you can see benefits from just taking it kind of like as a one-off. So the performance benefits here, 2 out of the 8 studies found significant performance improvements. 10K time trial was a 1.6% increase in power and 0.6% reduction in TT time. So that's awesome. That also, I feel like it tracks, like where it's
so little.
But that's what I mean by saying that it tracks, right? Sometimes when I see 11 and 12%, I'm kind of like, that seems crazy. If that was the case, we'd all be bathing in creatine or something, right? But then in this case, when I see 1.6% in power and then 0.6 in TT time, I'm like, that kind of like, that seems like an appropriate range. But that's my assumption on top of things. Wingate, they saw a 4.4% increase in power with that, which is a really interesting one. You would have more oxygenation is one of the benefits of nitrates. And so perhaps you'd have more oxidative capacity for a really short effort like that. It'd be interesting.
I don't know.
Yeah. But nitrates, they did see some benefit, but keep in mind that's 2 out of 8 studies. The rest of the 6, so the remaining 6 studies saw no benefit across the board. Then they had combos, creatine and caffeine. They saw no benefit in 1-minute sprint test and 45-minute constant load tests. They did see an increase in mean and peak power in intermittent sprints. And they also saw a 4.5% increase in time to exhaustion.
Wait.
If you took caffeine and creatine.
Yeah, but okay, so the other creatine only was 11% time to increase, and then caffeine and creatine 4.5. That's probably due to like dosing and amounts, because you would think that there would be some 1 plus A plus B equals C kind of thing, rather than A plus B equals B minus or something. Yeah. Look at the dosage.
This probably covers a really important thing to cover. Just with like human randomized control trials, they aren't perfect. Like people aren't just robots where you can replicate the exact same scenarios. Who knows what they ate, slept, or what happened in their lives in between the days of the tests as well. All these things can affect. And you just kind of have to always keep that in mind, And
then this you want like the same group probably doing the creatine and the caffeine and creatine have a washout, then do it the opposite and doing different orders and all of that to get a real what the percentage is. But in general, it seems like both of those are going to be a performance enhancement.
Individually, they showed likelihood, right? Or caffeine was strong evidence, then creatine was potential. And then together it seems like a safe bet. And also, like you said, cheap and approachable, and you can get in a lot of different ways.
Was creatine potential, or his constant load exhaustion, time to exhaustion is plus 11%, but just sprinting, no.
Correct. And in this case, what they found is that they said that there was like a potential for it, but not something like conclusive across the board.
Those scientists.
Yeah.
It stands to reason. The earth goes around the sun.
Yeah. And caffeine and sodium bicarbonate was another combo that did have some improvement. They saw no benefit in 3K time trial and high intensity test to exhaustion. But they did see a 2.3% decrease in time trial time and a 4.9% increase in power output in a 4-kilometer time trial. So that's sort of like, with both of these, it's hard to say that both of them working together has any sort of unique benefit. It could, caffeine has so much evidence behind it showing that it's significantly performance enhancing. So keep that handy as well.
That's why I'm killing this podcast.
Yes, that's right. It might just be caffeine.
The caffeine, what it does is reduces RPE. Mm-hmm. So then you don't stop as early because it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a really cool example of research that's kind of wrapped up in a tidy little bow for us, but you have to keep it in context still. It's a systematic review. It doesn't represent every study in the world. It represents the studies viewed through the lens of their criteria, but that is really helpful for all of us trying to make decisions when we get told by one person that this supplement's going to make us 20% faster than the other person that it's going to make you slower. So this is a really cool thing to see, and I'm super grateful that the authors publish this sort of stuff. Hopefully it guides new research too.
Okay, I like to give my recommendations based on this and my experience.
Love it.
Creatine, I say take it 5 grams a day. You're going to get what happens is you do get saturated to a point, and this 20 grams of creatine for 5 days. I believe the scientists wanted to get people to the saturated point, and this would do it, but you don't need to do that forever.
After that, you taper off, right?
And not just, you get to 100% full, and you're not using all 20.
Yeah. So you taper off in your dosage to like 5.
No, I just do 5 every day, or sometimes 10. It depends. But basically, there was some like a study that worried about kidney with like a lot high creatine use. My understanding is, unless you have some kidney problems, it's not an issue. I think it's one of the most studied supplements in the world.
Can I share one more thing on creatine here? I just saw a study reference the other day that showed a 10% increase in body weight. No, 10 pound increase in body weight for a person that they were on creatine, and an influencer was running with that, just saying that
10% or 10, what was it?
It was 10 pounds increase. And I know, right? That's a lot.
That seems crazy.
And this researcher was basically running with that study, or not a researcher, an influencer, very different people, not the same. They were running with that and just saying like, don't take this for endurance athletes. Here's a study that shows why this person gained 10 pounds. Who knows why that person gained 10 pounds? I haven't looked into the study and I don't know how controlled it was. I don't know what the scenario was. It's also worth saying if that person's like severely dehydrated or something and then coming in thereafter, there's a lot of different things. But you will gain weight when you take creatine. 10 pounds is an extreme amount of weight to gain.
It's like 1 to 3 maybe.
Yeah.
But again, the cognitive benefits I think are going to be worth it. Just buy a new bike and tires. Just kidding. I see a lot of jokes now. I can say so many more jokes now that we can really jump in. What happens with creatine is it makes your muscles hold more water. So people might say you're going to be puffy. Your skin you don't hold any more water between your skin and your muscles. Even bodybuilders will take it right before they step on stage, is when they really want to be shredded. To think about a 10-pound increase, which means you would have effectively 10 more pounds of muscle. You go to the store and you get that package of ground beef that's a pound. It's a pretty big package. I have 2 hands up, right? Take one of those and put 10 of those on your body. People train for years to get 10 pounds. And this thing's saying like, in
Everybody's
5
trying
days,
to find that
I can look like I did train for years and like to have 10 more pounds of muscle. Right. I mean, I can totally have a 10-pound swing though of like hydration, glycogen. Like people do it in before fights all the time, right? They drop like 10, 15 pounds. Yeah. That's possible, but I don't know. So anyway, going back to this, I would just do 5 to 10 grams every day. You're gonna hit that loading period like pretty fast. Creatine, that sounds good. Caffeine, the amount of caffeine they show in here is so much that this, I think, will impact the rest of your life. And I would save this 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram for race day or really big key workout that you're going to do, that you have plenty of time before you need to go to sleep.
So you're saying, when you're saying impact the rest of your life, have a negative impact on the things outside of your training.
Jittery and you're not going to be able to sleep. Yeah. And I've noticed this where I do that 6 because I've seen these studies, 6 milligrams. That was my target. And it makes 2 things. It makes your workout, you can go so much deeper that you're not going to be able to sleep as well. Plus you have the caffeine and the half-life of caffeine. You're going to have so much inside of your body still while you go to sleep. A good rule of thumb is not before afternoon, but that is considering normal caffeine usage. If you're doing twice as much, then it's like at noon, you're taking your initial, well, it depends on how early you take in the day, but
that's a tricky thing because I see a lot of athletes like gels with caffeine or drink mix with caffeine is really common. And I see a lot of athletes just taking it on training and that sort of thing. And it's in the afternoon, even into the evening. Yeah. And it is affecting your sleep. Even if you feel like you can sleep well and everything else, you probably just don't know. There's opportunity costs there that you don't know about.
The one thing I'm not sure about is certain cases of ADHD, it actually calms you. And I don't know if that also impacts sleep or not. That's interesting. It does the opposite effect of you, which is, wow. Yeah, it's crazy. And some people drink coffee right before bed in order to sleep. But I don't know if that is, the outcome is also you sleep better or it just makes you like more calm. So you're not like anxious. Yeah. And your system is more be able to focus on something. That's why you're calm. And then you go to sleep.
That's crazy.
I don't know on that, but I would also do in the morning, still use caffeine before workouts, but a regular dose. Like whatever your normal dose is, you can combine that with a workout. And then on the sodium bicarbonate, what I would do is I would get the pills. The pills are cheap, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'll look right now. Yeah. While you go through that.
Get the pills. I would try it on a day that I'm not doing anything, just my stomach feels. And then I would probably try that with some banana or something just in case. Yep. And then I would do those before longer workouts. And I would probably do it if I didn't have stomach issues, I'd probably do it before every workout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because it's cheap. Well. And
so I'm going to do the math here. If I'm going to do 0.2 times 69 kilograms, which is my weight here, it says 13.8. If I'm going to take 13.8 grams Is that grams? Let me double check. Grams per kilogram of body weight. You can go on Amazon. You can buy a $26 tub of these things, and it comes out to 3 cents per. And that's 650 milligram tablets, 1,000 of them. So divided by, so that's going to last me months.
Months.
Like months.
For how much?
$26.
Yeah. And is that daily or is that?
Yeah, I could take it daily and it would last
Exactly.
months.
So you take it 2 times a week or something for your big workouts.
That's right.
Yeah.
And big workouts and races are when you really want it. It's not going to help you on your endurance rides. So.
Yeah, I think I would do like the hard days, right?
Correct. And when we even say hard, it's like threshold and above. And even then, like on like the anaerobic stuff that isn't like on a sprint day, I might not use it. Like I wouldn't need to. Like,
I mean, for how cheap it is, I would do it on Sweet Spot too.
Sure.
And then the other nice part about it is if you do it consistently, you can really understand your stomach. And because it's the worst is when you go, I'm going to save this $20 gel for race day, and you do it and you're like hurting before race day.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And you could easily fall victim to that one.
Yeah.
What about beta alanine? Do you, I guess for like, cause you're mostly doing strength training these days.
Yeah.
And I know beta alanine is definitely included in a lot of pre-workout stuff. But for cyclists, and this isn't just this systematic review, I wanted to actually do like a video reviewing the research on beta alanine. And after looking at it, I just couldn't find a lot of research the body of research seems inconclusive.
Yeah.
So likely to not have a benefit.
If I remember correctly, it was supposed to be like it's marketed towards short, hard efforts, being the benefit to it. And so I used to take it on short, hard effort days.
Yeah.
And I got tingly and it kind of makes me feel uncomfortable. And I don't really know if that's probably not a benefit.
Yeah.
And now today obviously you can tell I do weight training now.
You're watching.
and the mustache. That's what I was talking about.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
I don't do that anymore. It's just, creatine is the massive one. And again, carbs in weight training is crazy because you pump up and carbs and some salt and water, you get these giant gym pumps and you feel good and you can lift some more.
Oh yeah.
I still love carbs.
Dude, it's becoming in vogue, even in golf. Like, I know it seems like off the wall, but Bryson DeChambeau, like one of the best like golfers, he was built like a normal guy. And then like, he's super data driven, does everything unorthodox. He went and just trains like an absolute animal and he's huge now, just really strong, big guy. And it's cool because you see him out on the golf course and stuff, and he always talks about what he's eating, and it's just carbs. He's just huge on carbohydrate.
He eats during the game.
During golf, which you would think that like, oh yeah, it's, you're just walking around.
Alcohol you need.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just Arnold Palmer's. But no, it's like.
That's not alcohol, John.
Oh, it's not, I don't know, no clue. I just see it all the time on the golf cart, on the meal cart that goes around. So, it's tea, isn't it? It's iced tea.
It's iced tea and lemonade.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah.
That's the Mormon LDS alcohol. It's spicy.
That's right. So beta alanine, inconclusive. And then nitrates, man.
Mess my stomach up.
Do they really?
Oh, heartburn.
Oh.
That's the one, is like it's fine. And then heartburn, especially if you're bent over. And then eating other gels were problems. I would get such bad, at least from the Beat It stuff that I would do.
Oh yeah. Cause that had a decent amount of like, beets themselves. And then I think it has like a lot of lime or lemon juice in there too.
To like cut the flavor.
It helps the flavor, but that's really acidic and can cause some other things. I've done the beet thing. I've gone through beet supplements. I've gone through actually juicing my own beets or even blending my own beets. I've done a lot of different stuff. And
sounds messy.
Oh, it's so messy. It's a pain. I just don't like, I'm not really typically a picky person, but beets are never going to be something that I really want. It's just meh,
We did a Instagram video that showed the amount of nitrates in different kind of beet
that
things.
study was wild.
Yeah, and the
Dr. Coggin was involved in that one, and somebody else. Yeah, it's wild. I'll link to it.
The highest was it was like the lake something. It was just beet juice that you get at the grocery store.
Yes,
and it was the cheapest thing out of everything. And it's the most accessible, and it was the highest amount of nitrates.
Yeah, it's organic tart cherry juice. I'm gonna search for it right here because it was not. It's Lakewood Organics.
Yeah, Lakewood Organics. That was the top one.
You can find them at like any store
in the U.S.
Yep, in the U.S. There's also some products over in in Europe that are like, I guess a whole lot cheaper than what we have over here for that sort of thing. And you'll see like, I did a video on this because everyone was saying that like they're taking in beets. It doesn't make sense after the tour because Tade, Geraint Thomas, everybody was drinking something that looked like it, but it's a tart cherry juice primarily drink that they have.
A what?
Tart cherry juice.
Man,
I know.
wish we would have known about this years ago.
Yeah, if only somebody was telling us about it. Yeah. Tart cherry juice, and it does have like some beets and stuff in there from what I understand, but it's mostly tart cherry juice. But yeah, nitrates don't seem to be as beneficial perhaps as some might think. So anyways, hopefully this is helpful to everybody. This is the sort of stuff that we're always looking at the physiology side of things in terms of like testing different ways to train and get faster. And then we're also looking at the supplement side because it interests us because we're cyclists just like you. If you found this helpful, and now if you know that like, hey, I can save a bunch of money and I can just put it into caffeine, creatine, and sodium bicarbonate, and you can get those cheap capsules and do it that way, then maybe you have some more money to be able to spend on traveling to cool races, doing anything else. Using TrainerRoad.
There you go. The amount of money that we just saved you, or John saved you, is definitely worth it. And I almost say, like, if you do what we just put in those plans, the balanced or above, and you do those workouts, we will give you a better improvement than these supplements.
Yes, 100%.
There'll be somebody got like 5.5 watts per kilo it won't work for. But if you're in the
Actually,
vast...
Let's correct that. It's not that it won't work for them, but they probably hit it to the point where they're going to have fractions of a percent improvement rather than something else. Because we have athletes,
yes.
Although it is surprising, everyone thinks that like, oh, if you're fast on a bike, you must be 5 watts per kilogram. Everybody else is 5 watts per kilogram.
There's barely
it's
anyone.
It's not even it's not a
so
single
rare.
percent.
Yeah.
It's fractions of it. And this is across athletes in 150 countries of all ability levels.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands. And it's having an accurate, some people say they are, and then they never hit those power numbers. So we don't count that. If just you say you are, but you never actually can operate around 5 watts per kilo. And that happens pretty often.
Oh yeah. It's like the high water mark versus the water level thing again.
Yeah. Right. You always remember your glory days. How much do you bench? 315.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I saw someone do that in high school, and I spotted them. It was a group effort. But yeah, I think we will increase all of this stuff. Then I say you do them all.
Yeah, 100%. Go for it. With that, thanks for joining us, everybody. If you want to see more in-person episodes, let us know. Let us know what supplements you find helpful, or if your individual evidence doesn't align with something in here, let us know, because then that's always interesting to see if maybe one of those things really works for you and you do get faster.
What's like the new one we're sleeping on that we don't know?
Oh, I know, right?
Right? I'll take it.
I saw a bucket of horse feed that was like, marketed as like something they use for like horse racing or something. It was making its round in the cycling memes that it's like the new pre-workout.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a joke.
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
Just hay.
Just hay. All right, everybody. Thanks a bunch. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye-bye.